What's going on, everybody? Mr. Harvey here. Let's continue our lecture on Chapter 13. And today is a little bit of a continuation from yesterday's lecture. We're going to be talking about women, ladies and gentlemen, family life, marriage during the Industrial Revolution, the 19th century. And we're also going to be talking about changes in law enforcement and prison reform during the 19th century. So let's get into it. So, as I talked about yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, the Industrial Revolution is going to have significant social implications in Europe, ladies and gentlemen, during the 19th century. It's going to have an enormous impact on the home, on family life, and on women during the 19th century. And we're going to see during this time kind of a new concept of gender-determined roles in the home and domestic life. Now, within this new concept of gender-determined roles in the home and domestic life, we're going to see some continuity and change. The continuities, we're going to see still men dominate kind of the economic sphere and women be traditionally relegated to that domestic sphere, but it's within a new setting of the Industrial Revolution. We're going to see men considered this breadwinner, bringing home the wages, and then women seen as kind of that domestic caretaker, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids, taking care of the home. All right. So we see just a new setting, right? This new era of urbanization, of industrialization. We're seeing men dominating the factories, dominating this wage economy, and women dominating the new urban settings, the new urban areas that we're seeing. But there's very much traditional notions that we've studied since the Renaissance that are continuing, right? Men dominating economics versus women being relegated to the domestic sphere. But the setting and the time period is just a little bit is changing, right? We're in the 19th century now. Okay. Another thing that we're going to be seeing, ladies and gentlemen, is textiles are changing, and we've talked about this ever since we started talking about the Industrial Revolution. The early Industrial Revolution, proto-industrialization around textiles. Centered around textiles, and women were, very much involved in that process, right? Spinning, weaving, creating those textiles for the merchants within proto-industrialization, and women were involved in all stages of production. But we saw a huge change in within textile manufacturing when we see the mechanization of textiles. As we see the new machines being brought in, as we see industrialization start, we're going to see men displace women. Men work the machines that produce textiles, and women be displaced and kind of kicked out of that industry. And like I said yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, men who make high wages are going to allow women to completely leave the textile industry, completely leave the economy, or only work a little bit to supplement the male income. But we're going to see men who make high wages, their wives will be given the opportunity to leave economics altogether. Okay, which is a change that we're going to be seeing. Now, we're also going to see another change is when we see a next generation of machines in the 1820s, we're going to see many unskilled single women start to enter the factories. Well, one reason is we're going to see these women are very much willing to work for lower wages, but also these newer machines are going to require less skill. But a norm that we're going to be seeing develop within the 1820s, 1830s, 1840s, especially when we see factories with single, unmarried women, is that they're almost always going to be supervised by male figures. A boss, a floor manager, a factory owner will typically be a male figure. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Now, something I want to note that's really important for us to understand is even though we're seeing rapid industrialization, in Great Britain and elsewhere by 1850, industrial factory work will still account for less than half of the employment for women. So just because we're seeing massive amounts of industrialization, many people entering these new industrial industries, mining, railroad building, textiles, all these new industries, we're going to see, some women have other avenues of work. In France, the largest group of women workers will still be in rural areas on the land, agricultural workers. And in England, actually, the area that's really industrializing pretty quickly, the largest group of women are going to work as domestic servants. So, I'm just kind of pointing that out there, ladies and gentlemen. It's really important for us to note, so you don't make the assumption just because we're seeing rapid industrialization, meaning that, and talking about women in the context of women, the majority of women are going to be working in industrial fields. It's not necessarily true. Okay, but a commonality that's really gonna exist amongst women in Europe during this time is that the work that women do, they're typically paid lower wages for that work, ladies and gentlemen, and the work that they are typically allowed to participate in was typically lower skilled work. Also, moreover, the conditions that women typically are going to work in are very harsh. They really don't have effective means to protect themselves from exploitation. And we're going to see women be exploited in numerous ways. Economically, ladies and gentlemen, by being paid lower wages. There's not going to be any laws, for equal pay. And women are also going to be sexually exploited. And we're going to see many women, because they're paid such poor wages, actually turn to prostitutions in these new urban areas as a way to supplement their income. And we will be talking about that in subsequent lectures and chapters. Okay. Now we're going to see some significant changes for marriage as well, ladies and gentlemen. Urbanization, migration, moving to the city in this new wage economy is going to give women wider opportunities for marriage, and there's going to be some serious changes for marriage. Parents are going to have less to do with arranging marriage. We're going to see couples living together, cohabitation become much more common. And like I said before, a woman can leave the workforce to live on her husband's earnings once they're married. Now, if the husband dies, that woman will probably have to enter the workforce as an unskilled laborer. But, if a woman's married, her husband's making enough money, she won't have to work. We're going to see marriage continue to be less of an economic partnership. And remember, that kind of goes all the way back to Protestantism, right? The Protestants marrying for love as opposed to purely economics. And so we're seeing a little continuity within that, ladies and gentlemen. However, some traditions are still going to exist, ladies and gentlemen. Women, their most likely occupation, we're still going to see them as domestic servants, maids of some type, workers of some type in domestic sphere, and dowries. Dowries are still going to be really important. Having money for marriage. Okay, those are going to be some norms that still exist. But life in the city is different. Urbanization is creating huge social changes, especially for marriage. There's going to be for women, more young men for women to interact with. We're going to see more sexual activity, which will facilitate more illegitimate births because we don't have modern medicine, contraceptives. Okay, so there's going to be some drastic changes with urbanization, with industrialization when it comes to marriage and social life in Europe, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, and like I said before, despite the benefit of the husband's salary, marriage is still considered, and marriage is becoming less of an economic partnership. And gender structures are going to differ from previous historical eras. But the separation of the workplace and domestic place will be tough for women. And like I said before, women, married women are only going to work outside the home when they're forced to. And women are going to be taking care of the home, not just for the wage-earning husband, but for children as well. And something that I found really interesting, ladies and gentlemen, during this time is that we're going to actually see families see it more beneficial to send children to work as opposed to the female of the house, as to the mother of the house. And that could, be a possible explanation for the rise of child workers. And the reason for that is, by sending the children out to work, the mother can still stay at home and, cook and clean and take care of the house, and not have to take care of the kids. The kids are out, working, bringing home revenue and wages. And so that's something that we're going to be seeing during this time as well, ladies and gentlemen. And domestically, women are going to be in charge of the finances and, like I said before, of the home and the cooking and the cleaning. All right. Now I want to shift gears a little bit, ladies and gentlemen, and talk a little about crime order within the Industrial Revolution. Throughout the 19th century and the Industrial Revolution, we're seeing some huge changes, urbanization, migration. And you're starting to see a lot of people from all different walks of life living together in more condensed areas. And the political and economic elite in Europe are concerned about social order. The revolutions that we've talked about, the French Revolution, the Revolution of 1830, all those revolutions that we've talked about concern them about order, as did, the industrialization and the prospect of urbanization and, these different social classes living in close proximity, right next to each other. So there's going to be some concern about social order with these, new massive urban areas and with these massive populations. And as the population increases, we're going to see crime rates increase. Theft, arson, Okay, the crime will increase, ladies and gentlemen. Now, it's kind of difficult to pinpoint exactly what caused this, but we're going to see some new ideas emerge within this urbanization and migration from the propertied elite classes, and that's going to be better systems of police and prison. And so you're going to see this notion of a police force, a paid, professional, trained group of law enforcement that's distinct from the army and charged with domestic security. And the idea behind the police that we're going to be seeing during these times in the 19th century is you have this visible presence of law enforcement could act as a preventative measure. A deterrence, right? If you see this police force out there, people are more likely less likely to commit a crime, more likely to stop, to not do something bad. Okay, so we're going to see new police forces, who keep the order. They're going to protect property and lives, investigate crime, and apprehend people who break the law. Okay, so professional police did not really exist until the 19th century, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to see as a police forces rise, it's going to differ from country to country. It appeared in France in 1828, in England in 1829. They're going to be called the bobbies. We're going to see police rise in 1848, and only the officers in England did not carry guns. And we're going to see these police forces in Europe, kind of find different ways to manage these new urban areas. We're also going to see prison reform, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, instead of all prisoners being housed together with all others, we're going to see offenders of serious crimes are going to be sent to different areas. We're going to see in South Wales, Australia, and we're going to see another change that we're going to be seeing is this notion of punishment to reform. That's going to be a huge new notion, is the idea of not necessarily punishing a prisoner, but maybe reforming them so they can come back to contribute to society in a positive way. We're going to see experiments with different types of housing prisoners, isolating prisoners from one another. Maybe that will have a positive effect on them. Sometimes, and most of the time, it's not really going to help them. It's often going to lead to significant mental health problems for prisoners being isolated completely. But Europeans during this time are trying different ways and trying new ideas when it comes to prison. Teaching prisoners a skill or a trade, so eventually when they're released, they can go back into society and have a job or have a trade. And we're going to see some of the worst criminals be sent to some very remote areas. For example, the French criminals are going to be sent to this Devil's Island in South America. Okay, and let's continue talking about that. So, prior to the 19th century, European prisons were either local jails or state prisons, such as the Bastille. And the Bastille was definitely one of the more famous prisons in Europe. The governments also, prior to the 19th century, used prison boats where prisoners rode until they died or were released. Prior to the 19th century, conditions were really bad. You might have men, women, and children all housed together, which created a whole sort of problems. And like I said before, we're going to see some reforms in which you have some offenders be put some different areas. The most serious offenders be completely transported out of the country. So some significant, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want you to have to memorize all this, but we're seeing some significant changes when it comes to approaching prison. Okay, and Europeans are trying to create better systems of prison and prison management. Okay, and some of the leading reformers during this time were John Howard and Elizabeth Fry of Great Britain and Charles Lucas of France. And this is kind of similar to the previous slide, but this is a reform, trying to rehabilitate the prisoner, trying to give them skills. All right, the goals of this change, like I said before, is to reform. Okay, not to have a prison system that necessarily punishes, but to teach the skills to a prisoner to help them advance in society when they get out of prison. There's a couple important Systems that we see try to be implemented, this Auburn and Philadelphia system of separating prisoners from one another. These prison separation tactics that I mentioned before are not going to be very successful. It's often going to lead to mental health problems. But like I said, they're trying to rehabilitate the prisoner, trying to teach them skills or a trade, but they will, and also transport repeat offenders or prisoners who commit very serious crimes. Okay, and there is a picture of the English Bobby. All right, and this is some exercise in a prison, a way to help the prisoners exercise while they are in prison. Let's stop here for today, ladies and gentlemen. In the next lecture, we're going to talk a little bit about classical economics, capitalism, and then we're going to be talking about socialism and communism. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great day.